three key points. So of course, we want to focus on some attention points of the revision process that we're going through. And so our experts will highlight, I would say, some of the key comments which were made, and then the solutions that are being proposed. I think then a second important topic will be the shackle shapes, which is a topic as such. And then we'll also discuss the start of the public review period, which is also important as a formal step. So without any further ado, just from a logistics point of view, of course, this webinar is organized, I would say, to get your feedback. If you have a question or a comment, please use the chat. And myself, Pavlina, Max, the whole team managing the webinar will give you then the floor when we can address your comment or your question. So at the first stage, try to focus on the chat to just help us steer the discussion. And yeah, I think that was, I would say, the key logistic element. So very happy to hand over the floor to Pavlina, who has been managing the whole revision process very well. So Pavlina, I hand over the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Seth. First of all, I would like to welcome you all to this webinar. It's a pleasure having you here and receiving your feedback and contribution. From adding to the logistic part, I would like to kindly have your approval to record this webinar because a lot of other members of the working group that don't have the chance to participate are requesting for previous recordings. As you may already know, next slide please, the objective of this webinar is a continuation of the previous webinar towards a new release, which we explicitly highlight that this new release is not a major release, but it is a minor release aiming at reducing the open issues which were quite enough, but most importantly to clarify a bit some issues that had to do with the alignment of the community on the DCAT-AP specifications. To elaborate more on this, we have a number of issues that are addressing the issue of how the specifications should be read and interpreted, and this also involved the DCAT-AP relationship with other representations. So we found useful that we wanted to focus on the purpose and objective as well as the scope of DCAT-AP in order also to better handling different issues that appear into GitHub. Next slide, please. So as some of you had the chance to attend, and for those that didn't have the chance to attend, we had an first webinar, the 15th of September, where we tried to tackle different to first tackle the issues that were presented into GitHub. So we prepared a candidate release. Now the intention is to have to resolve issues so that then they can be included into the final release. So until the 15th of November, we are going into a public review process, so that from the 15th of November until the 1st of December, we can go and prepare the official release. Just a small request, please mute yourselves, your microphones while attending. Next slide, please. So until the 1st of October, we had quite a number of issues, approximately 80 80 issues. Most of them had proposed, now have a proposed resolution on GitHub. Among those, 54 of them required alignment by the community, and 26 of them tackled issues such as editorial issues, topics that went beyond the specification. What we are going to do today is to focus on 15 specific issues, when 24 of them, as well as 24 of them as a part of a larger topic. Since the previous webinar, we had only one new issue, which was related to dataset series, as well as additionally, one issue was propagated to W3C because it tackled an issue that has to do with DCAT. In the link, you can see the proposed version, the current proposal into GitHub. So we can see all the information there, as well as the proposed solutions, suggestions to almost each and every GitHub issue. So from here, the agenda, as it was mentioned by Seb, is to have a recap from the previous webinar, meaning that position ourselves into more into specific issues and reach out a final solution, focus on also specific property request, and we are, since we didn't have the time during the previous webinar to tackle some important shackle shape issues. We have selected some of them because, as you may recall, last year we have extensive webinar explicit on the shackle shapes, and we are going to discuss about our next step. So I give the floor to my colleague Bert van Nuffelen, so that he can proceed with the presentation.
Thank you, Pavlina. And as usual, Max will do the orchestration and have a look to timing and the chat, etc. So, okay, we do a short recap from the previous webinar on some of the topics that we have been discussing, and to say how we have resolved them. So, and then some topics that are related to that, so that we are clear that the solution that we have discussed last time can be adopted. We had extensive discussion on what is a dataset distribution and a data service, and there are a lot of issues related to that topic. And in blue, you see on the top level the way how you can get to the GitHub issue. So if you select the label topic catalog resources, then you have all issues that are related to this topic. And if it's a hash number, then you can point to the specific GitHub issue. So we have discussed on this different entities, these entities, and then this was our conclusion, that we mainly look towards distributions as things that are file-oriented access, and that data service is mostly anything else. So that this is kind of the rough distinction that we want to describe in a guideline. And this guideline is now written and available for review. So this is the link where you can find it. And I invite you that you discuss on this. Sorry, this is a bit annoying on my side. It's shifting, yeah. So in issue 204, you find as well the same link. So this is the invitation. Have a look to it, so that we can have common discussions and feedback from your side, if you agree or not agree, or we have some improvements to make. and then we can take that as a part of the usage guidelines in the specification. A second thing is, if we look from that perspective, then there were some related issues on what is mandatory and what is recommended of the relationships and the key relationships. And if we look to that, then we have three key relationships that have to do with ourselves. DCAT dataset and DCAT service, that indicates the entities that are located in the catalog. There, at this moment, there's mandatory DCAT dataset and DCAT service is recommended, I think. Whereas for distribution, if we have for a dataset has a distribution, there at this moment it is recommended. And if we look from a service to a dataset, then service dataset is as well recommended. So what is the proposal is that we not make any of these anymore mandatory, but recommended. And this means that mostly a change at the level of DCAT data service and DCAT service, to enable that you have a catalog of only services or a catalog of only data sets available, and that we have this possibility as available. So there's a change of qualification over there. And the other two are just for reference included, that the qualification stays recommended. So this is the proposal. So if there's any feedback from the community, we do it like this. So yeah, like Jim already does, if you are supporting it, +1. If you have a negative mark, then you can do -1 or something like this, then we see that as well.
Hello. Question, you can do a question mark.
Okay. Hi, this is Fabian from Fraunhofer Focus. Actually, I also started a discussion about this in GitHub and months ago. So you say that it's still possible, it will be possible that catalogs can have just data services without data sets.
In principle, it can be possible, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you remember the issue I raised in GitHub about this, but it makes things very complicated to allow this. And what we see I'm one of the developers of Data Europa. What we see that all data providers who are using data services right now, they just use it in distributions. They don't use it on a catalog level. And we would be very happy if there would be more discussion about this, because it makes things so complicated that you have a data service which can be part of a catalog, it can be part of a distribution, and people struggle a little bit with implementing this.
Well, you mean that the difference between a distribution versus a service, or do you mean the fact that you only have a catalog of only services? Because that's
yes, that fact is difficult, because in DCAT-AP the data service also has very limited properties. You have just 5 or 4. Maybe you also want to change this, but you have very limited properties. And a data service itself, if you put it in the catalog, it's not complete. It describes just the URL in a short description. It's very hard to put this into a portal if you have a list of data services with just those few properties.
Yes, so this is kind of what we have in your. I agree in the sense that there's very little information about enforced information of a data service. There's a bit of a balance that we have to find, in the sense that you can, of course, try to improve this quality of this extra information to highlight it and to make it more recommended or to make it mandatory. But on the other hand, we have to see that people should be able to feed this information. That's always as well a balance before going into it. Now, on the set of only services, the allowance of a catalog of only services doesn't mean that these services might not refer to a data set that is not mentioned in the same catalog. They might mention I'm accessing a service that is somewhere, a data set that is in another catalog. So I can, for instance, as a Belgian service referred to a data set that is managed at the regional level in Wallonia, for instance. So they might be coming from two catalogs. So that's an ability that we then allow now. A second thing is that services, if you want to have more information about that and to see it more better on portals, then it's a bit like good learning and lessons from portal builders. What is kind of the minimal needs in order to say something about it? Because data services in their own right, they have a lot of technical information, but that's maybe not the thing that you would like to put on the portal itself as a high level. For instance, if somebody does make a REST API, he makes a good Swagger specification, but out of the Swagger specification, you put probably on the portal only the high level business reason why the service exists. And that might not be even present in the Swagger representation.
Could I perhaps provide some examples here from the Swedish case? And Matthias here. I'm sorry, I lost the name from the developer who spoke before. Fabian, thanks. So what we did in the development of the Swedish data portal is that we did recognize that there are two different cases. One case where you have something which we want to present as a data service or an API. It's a standalone thing, and we want it to be searchable and found. And in that case, we require there to be more information on that data service. There must be a publisher, there should be a description, there should be some more information that makes it easy to present. In that case, we also kind of assume that there is a relation from the catalog level to the data service. But this is not the common case. The common case is when you have the data service as a slave to the distribution. And in that case, we have a very minimal data service expression, which is linked to from the distribution, but it has type, it has endpoint and an endpoint description. It has a few other fields. And this one we never expose directly when you search for something. This is only shown when you are viewing an individual data set and its distributions and as an enrichment of one of the distributions.
Yes,
these two cases could be very nice if we could clarify as two typical cases from my perspective.
I completely understand the two cases, and the second one is the one we are totally agree here. It makes sense to have distributions which have data services and so on. But the first one, again, if you do it like this, then a lot of properties are missing in the data service. And because data service comes from resource, from DCAT, and they usually you have all those properties. But in DCAT-AP, you don't have issue date, you don't have modified date, you don't have a publisher. So if you put this service just in the catalog, it's just some URL with a short description. It's not very comprehensive.
Yes, exactly. And that's why we, in the Swedish profile, we added those back. We said that the DCAT-AP 2.0.0 did not have enough properties. So we said that we added those back. And I think that in the last meeting, we discussed whether these should be provided or not.
We discussed that, well, it's a bit of profile readings in sense of that, that they should be applicable in the way DCAT has mentioned them semantically. That's what we said. But we didn't put extra rules that they should be mandatory there or something. We didn't do anything about that. So.
And exactly, you can't say that they are mandatory since you have to cover both cases. So I think you would have to say they are mandatory in the perspective of there being a standalone data service, and they are recommended in the case if they are just a slave to one of the distributions.
May I suggest
like the concept is not complete here. Then maybe you need two different kind of data services.
That's a possibility. I was going to suggest that that is actually something that I think would fit well with the guidelines that are also under review, because the guidelines now, if I look at them, are fairly short, and I think the usage guide that Pep was talking about, and I think that probably this issue needs to come into the guidelines in some way to tell people what to do in those two cases. Would that be acceptable?
I think it's exactly what is needed.
Yeah, I think we can't actually write the guidelines here and now, but I think if we do that, then we certainly will take into account the contributions from Fabian and from Matthias, and then try to write that down in a way that it's understandable for implementers. Is that okay with you, Fabian?
So you would write down that if you use a data service in catalogs, you maybe need to add further properties.
I'm not actually preempting what we're going to write. I say we need to write something that is understandable for your cases and for Matthias' cases.
Yeah, that I agree totally. We need, or you need to, maybe can also contribute to write something that all the publishers know what to do.
Yeah. With. Your contribution would be very welcome. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, what we need, very practically, what we needed to do is that we needed to do queries to find only data services that are standalone and queries that excluded those. And we needed one single thing that we would know always. If this property is here, then this is a standalone data service. And we used the publisher because presenting a data service without a publisher wouldn't make sense. A standalone one.
But let's move that to the discussion on the usage node. Okay.
Yeah, but this is good input in the sense that this kind of case is important to mention. I want to add as well the perspective from the geospatial community, where they already have services as standalone. So they describe as well their services as already there standalone, and in that case they have additional properties in individual perspectives that they enforce to be there. So they do that already. So normally if you get data from the geospatial community, then those services should be nicely described already. Okay, there were some topics in the chat. Are there any, Max, that we should take now?
It's basically the same issue. Natalia and Jim agree that if you describe them as separate first-class citizens, you need more properties for them.
Okay, good. So that's a topic then we have to take into account and for the usage guideline. So for the rest, I saw only pluses for this proposal.
Yeah.
So then we can continue to the next. Okay. There is in this list of associated topic as well GitHub issue 202, which actually asks to add a DCT type property for distribution with the proposed code list, downloadable file, feed info, visualization, and web service. Now, coming back to our discussion, what is kind of primarily intended for DB distribution and what is primarily intended then for services, then the first value would be clearly a distribution. That is what is the core case. And feed info and web service are much more into the services case. Visualizations, personally, I intend that more as well on the services case, but it might be if you see that as a set of pictures, then it's more on the downloadable file case or distribution case. So there might be differences into it. But given that, it means that actually by our guideline, we have already somehow given this type much more clear, and there's no need to do that. So this is currently our proposal, actually not to adopt and to take DCT type on distribution with then this controlled vocabulary. So if there are any other opinion with regard to this, so if there
any pluses 1 or -1 in the chat, I don't see any. I can see a +1 from Jakob. And Jim is also in agreement. Okay.
Well, DCT type as such is then not anymore needed. If you want, if your local profile needs it, you still can add it. But at least with the motivation for having access to this controlled vocabulary, there's no need anymore. So then there's no need to add even the property. The answer to the question of Xavier. Okay, I think that this is, would it mean that the service can only be modeled as a data? That's the intent, to Jesper. Yes, that's the intent. So it would be kind of a, misguidance or sense of that we would try to reuse distributions again as services and so on, and to put everything in distributions. So this is the current practice by many of the catalog maintainers still, who didn't shift from DCAT-1 to this DCAT-2. But so we would like to motivate with this change as well, that you start to use the data service now much more as a real entity. So we would like to do that. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah.
Then I think can close to it. Good. Then we had this last time a long discussion on profiling, and one of the outcomes was a new updated figure. In the context of that figure discussion, there was a point raised that it would be still nice to have DCAT resource somehow visible, although it is being considered an abstract entity for DCAT-AP. Our proposal is to put it into the figure like an abstract notion. I've put it on the bottom to have minimal lines overlap, etc. So it's a bit of counterintuitive that the superclass is at the bottom, but okay, this is more organization, and unless I have started rearranging the whole picture, this was the kind of the most easiest thing to do. It will be continued, will be added with an explicit note, and that DCAT resource is kind of the abstract class, and that everything that gives meaning will be subject to the individual and specific business entity data sets and data service. So there's nothing changed except that we have now the DCAT resource visible in the figure to indicate that we are compliant and inherit from DCAT. Any comments from this? Furthermore, that's the change from last time that we did.
It was agreed last time to do that.
Yeah. Hello, Luke here. I think if we, I think this looks great. If we show the subclass relationship between dataset and resource, we should probably also show the subclass relation between catalog and dataset.
Ah, you mean that? Yeah, that we can do too. There is, however, on that topic, the subclass relationship between catalog and dataset there's as well an issue in W3C locked where this might cause profiling interpretations. So
yeah, it does. That's true.
So that's the reason why I try to avoid that one out of it. For the one that we see now on the screen, there's no issue at all. That's really fine. The subclass relationship might cause discussion points. And then I didn't raise it here, and even in the previous webinar. I think we should align that first. So have the issue and look the issue in W3C. It's one of the feedback requested. Have a look to it, to the case, and then you will see that there's potentially an issue in how we handle it. And I'm not going to do the discussion here now.
But if you're interested in the discussion, then we refer you to W3C and contribute there.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, if you're interested, I can look up the issue number, but I don't know by heart. Okay, that was from last time, and then that we already had prepared quite of resolutions for specific property issues. They were tagged in GitHub with feedback requests. And that is now what we're going to walk through with you, and hopefully we can find on many of them support for for the resolutions in either way, so that we much clearer know whether it is still to include or that this is for a future release. The first one I want to discuss with you is about legal information. So if we look to the issue 97, yeah, then you see that there is a discussion on rights and licenses and whether or not the license is always present and can be used or not. I listed here in the table where we have rights and license information available today in DCAT-AP. So we have this at the level of license and rights at the level of the catalog. We have license at the level of data service, and we have license and rights explicitly at the level of distribution. We don't have it at the level of data set. Then license is mainly recommended because we want to stimulate that publishers add legal information in the reuse context, and that historically that was applied on the most granular level, the distribution, and we have extended this to the data services in the previous major release. Now, if we go to the requests, then it was a request based on the fact that license information in the Czech Republic was not the most appropriate legal framework for legal information to share with datasets, and that rights are much more appropriate. And the request was then to turn the things around and saying that rights should be recommended, maybe even mandatory, and that license should be optional. That is the request. Now, since in most European member states, the inverse is still holding, or people thinking that license is still a valuable and case, and the rights is less expressed. We think that we should keep our proposal is to keep the situation as is, and it will not be contradict for the Czech Republic. Why? Because at this moment license is not mandatory, it is recommended, so you can use rights to express your legal context and be compliant thus with DCAT-AP. So this is actually not changing the recommendation nor changing something, making some more mandatory or something like that. So yeah, I don't know, Jakob, if you want to contribute to this specific, but this is our proposal.
Jakob seems to be in agreement with it.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this situation in the Czech Republic, as we think we might have the same problem or the same situation in Germany as well, because we have this data which has no it's not complex enough to be protected by copyright laws. Okay, we don't have copyright in Germany, but it's not protected by laws because it's so simple, the information. Is that the same problem in the Czech Republic?
Okay, I have to admit that this issue, I think, was brought up quite some time ago already, but yeah. I will try to explain. Basically, when we have a file cataloged in DCAT as a distribution of a data set, there is no, there can happen many options actually regarding the legal rights to that file. So first of all, it can be a product of public administration, which would make it free to use by everyone. And in that case, it is not licensable at all because there is nothing to license. Or it actually is protected by copyright. And then we have three categories that need to be licensed separately. One is the copyright on the file itself. Another one is a copyright on the file as a database, which is covered by a different piece of legislation here. And then there are the sui generis rights. That's another category of protection of intellectual property. And that needs to be also licensed in case where the file is protected. So there are many actually states in which the licensability of a file may be in. It definitely cannot be covered by a simple link to, let's say, CC BY and be done with it, because that simply doesn't apply in the Czech Republic. Yeah, currently our record in DCAT license points to an RDF resource, which is structured in those categories, and each of those categories either says that this is not applicable at all because it is free to use by everyone, or that because we are dealing only with open data, that the content is licensable and it is licensed by CC BY license or CC0 license in each of those categories. So it is a complex problem here.
Great, thank you.
Yep. So as Jesper says, and this seems to be that this Germany is a similar case. With regard to the specification, if I bring back this to the specification, it is possible to express, so we have the ability. Maybe then if I take the hat of a portal builder, then maybe rights become somehow a more prominent space to visualize, etc. No? That might be think of it.
And I can also say that there is quite a long discussion also at W3C about licensing, and one of the issues there also being discussed is the use of ODRL, the Open Rights License language, where you have a very, I think you can describe very complex cases. And what is being said at W3C, that is a possibility, but currently there doesn't seem to be a lot of application of that complex way of describing licenses. And also in DCAT-AP, I think we need to take into account that if you describe very complex licensing scenarios, which I understand you have to do, the question is if you share that information with other countries, whether people would actually understand what you're trying to tell them. But I think that's always the case. There's also what Bert says, a balance to be found between them. And I think DCAT-AP provides the possibilities to do it. And then we have to see also in the case of exchanging information, what actually is being understood by other countries. But I think currently the proposal here, I think, is to keep things as it is, because it does support the way that you want to describe it. That's what I understand, Brett, from the proposal.
Yes, that's indeed. Yeah, but nevertheless, I think, and then what we heard here on the table is that there might be that we look towards like what's kind of common rights statements or something that is we standardize it more so that the interoperability of this kind of text becomes better visible, etc., and that people are more across Europe aware of what is possible with the data.
And there's also the question from Natalia, what about CC0? I think you mean by CC0. And Jesper says they have created a license for data generated by public administration. And I think this is something that is clear. Some people might be able to use CC0 for this. For other people, I understand from the legal perspective, that's not always the best way to do it. So I think we see here an example that there are different ways of implementing this. The question from Luker, is there a plan for a list of licenses from the applications office? Javier, is that something, or Agnieszka or Natalia, is there something you can respond?
The list is available. I'll paste the link in the chat.
You say it's available in the chat? I don't see it in the chat.
Sorry, I'll paste it in a minute. I'll just go.
Okay, good.
It up.
Good. Okay, so shall we move on then?
Yeah, then something that came up, this was one of the new issues, although, well, it's posted in the geospatial issue list, because at the level of the, if you look to the geospatial data on Inspire and the ISO metadata there, they have legal information only at the level of the data set, not at the level of distribution as DCAT-AP and DCAT-AP actually looks at this most small fine-grained level. So the question is, and I just want to feel the temperature because it can go a lot of discussion either way, but either we allow for it and then we do the change to say we allow legal information as well at the level of data sets. Either we say we stay to the current practice that we put it at the most granular level, namely distribution and data service and catalog, where this is as a concrete meaning versus and that the data set is left without legal or rights statements. So I just want to know here what is there needs or feelings in the community that we should allow legal information at the level of data sets, and if we should pursue this track in the future.
See, Jacob not in agreement. Jacob?
Yeah, so he doesn't want to change. I suppose that this is no change.
Yes, exactly, no change.
Okay, good. Sorry.
So Jacob, -1 means no change. +1, you say I want to change. So
Jesper wants to change. Jesper?
Yes, because in Germany, usually information is protected, not the concrete, not the format itself. So if you have, for example, an image with different distribution, one distribution with a high resolution and one with a low resolution, it's not possible to give different licenses to one image than to the other. It's only the information itself is protected.
And Matthias also want to change?
I think the reason why, okay, Max, maybe you know, maybe you can help me, correct me here. I think that this is something that comes from Inspire, that you may have different licenses on different quality of services, like there are high resolutions of images and stuff like that. And then I think that should really be two different data sets rather than the same data set. So the way of having different licenses on distribution level is something that comes from the service world, not from the dataset world.
Well, yeah, I think what I remember, and that's a long time ago, this is basically a result of a discussion at W3C in DCAT, the first version, because there was a discussion to do this, and then people said, no, but in some cases we would have different licenses for distributions. And then to make it completely understandable and interoperable, people said, well, then it would be the best to keep it on the distribution. And if you have, in some cases, I understand that the license or the license would apply to all the distributions the same way because it is on the conceptual data, then still it doesn't hurt to provide that for each of the distributions. Otherwise, in those cases, you would have some cases where you have it on the data set and you need to interpret that as applying to all distributions. And it's easier to say, well, then the distribution, which are the kinds of things that you're going to download or access, have that information explicitly. That was the reason that the license came on the distribution in DCAT 1, and it stayed there. And I think the problem is still if it's Jesper said that if it is the license applies to the conceptual data, then it would mean that you need to interpret that to apply to all its distributions. And that implication was considered to be difficult. That's what the reason.
I don't think there is anything inherent in the RDF semantics that says that something applying on the dataset level necessarily must apply to all distributions, even though I think it's natural, but
yeah, but that was the problem, because
yeah.
there is no way of actually inheriting that. People said it should be then on the distribution, and if it's all the same for all the distributions, just repeat it for every distribution.
Yes, but it would be nice to see if there is an actual use case where it makes sense to have two different distributions, the licenses on two different distributions.
Yeah.
And for me, it means like if you have something which have different resolution, then I understand there could be two different licenses.
Yeah.
But from my understanding of the semantics of DCAT, you shouldn't have two different resolutions on two distributions. It should really be considered two different data sets.
Okay, but that's another discussion.
Yeah. Okay. But even
well, it could be that you have a PDF and a XML distribution, for example, where you have different licenses for them. Because you can do more things with an XML, then you might have a more restrictive license, for example. But I think there are cases that you could imagine. You're right. We don't have a clear view of that there are use cases that this applies, but I'm just saying that what we have in DCAT-AP is a result of that discussion early on in 2013 on what is the best way to do that coherently. So that's also this proposal keeps that coherence in that way. It just requires you to repeat the license on all the distributions if they're all the same.
Yeah, and this is similar as what Jakub now pasted in the chat from the usage notes in the
we had that discussion for DCAT 3 as well, and that is the result. That you can do it but it's still recommended to do it on the distributions.
On the level of a data portal, you typically need to duplicate the information from practical reasons on the dataset level, because you want to make it easy to provide a faceted or filtered view where you see all the, you can filter based on license, and you see the dataset, not the distributions.
So can I then conclude that we're in agreement with the proposal to not change?
I think it should still be allowed, but
yeah, it's still allowed, but would still need to be on the distribution as well.
Yes, okay.
Okay, good. That's then I will can answer this topic as well in this issue and relate that. Okay, now we go to a number of.
Excuse me, can you
yes,
say
sure.
again what we decided now? Because the chain, I got confused.
Okay, so the proposal is not to change anything except that if a bit of following the line of W3C, if you would have it at the data set level and we would like to use it there, then it must be, you cannot have only at the data set level. You should have it at the distribution level. So if you
basically the text at W3C actually says what we're going to say as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can
so
do it
we
in
are
addition.
aligning to DCAT-3.
Sorry?
So we are aligning us to DCAT-3.
Yes.
Okay.
That's in the end what we hopefully want to do with DCAT-AP as well, that we don't differentiate too much from it, maybe more restrictive, that we might say it should only. That could be then the case, but it should be, let's say, use that as the usage node on the approach.
Okay, good. Move on.
Thank you.
Okay, then a number of smaller topics where we would like to say yes or no. And so the request is to add a max cardinality on the temporal resolution. There was no explicit motivation provided, so this kind of, for me, a bit in the void. Two questions. If we want to do it, we have to say at which level that we want to do the temporal resolution, at the level of the data set or the distribution. And if there's no support for it, then we will not change and we will not apply the restriction. So is there any support for adding a max cardinality of 1 on the temporal resolution? And then on which class do you want to have it?
Anyone? If there's no comment, then we'll just make no change.
Well, it is again a question of the text we are using, the usage node, because the temporal resolution usage node for distribution is this property refers to the minimum time period resolvable, and there can only be one minimal time period resolvable, unless we give same twice. So that makes no sense. So in this case, it would make sense to either adjust the usage node or to change the cardinality to really show that this is the minimum time period. This is one point. So that would be a feasible reason, I think. So maybe, but I would say don't change the cardinality, change the text. So it's not the minimum resolution, it's a given resolution or a possible resolution. Shows the possible resolutions of the data set, and this can be multiple, have multiple values. But in the moment we have a mismatch between text and cardinality.
Okay, so the motivation for the request here was then the text, the incoherency between text and the cardinality. And so the proposal is now to update the text so that we not refer to the minimal, but to a temporal resolution.
Yeah, we have a counter proposal there from Matthias. Matthias wants max 1 for temporal resolution on both dataset and distribution. So no change to the usage note, but a restriction on cardinality. And yes, Jim, we're getting to spatial resolution in the next slide.
Yeah, I split it in two.
So if people agree that it is the minimum, then I understand that it's much logical to put the max cardinality at 1. Yeah.
So,
on the distribution, I don't see any interpretation that could be more than 1.
No, clear.
On the dataset level, you could allow several, but that would just replace the information you have on the distribution level.
Yeah.
So that would be more relevant to have a single one, a max cardinality of 1 on the dataset level as well, and being the minimum 1 that you have in any of the distributions.
Yeah. Okay.
So to the proposal from Matthias is to highlight the fact that it's the minimum temporal resolution and that we want to capture that one.
Yeah. On the dataset.
Mm-hmm.
And that every distribution can have its own.
And then there is indeed 1, max 1. Then,
yeah.
So
it's max 1 on both.
So yeah, is that a proposal that the community would like, or so not to change? Well, maybe improve the usage notes, but to highlight much more the minimal.
To support what is the request. I mean, that's the request says. I mean, it becomes a bit hard to understand what we are actually voting about. But now I think that the request is to add max cardinality of 1, and whether it should be on the dataset distribution. And I think it should be on both.
Yeah.
So if we interpret the request as that, how many agree with that?
I have no real use case, so I cannot argue with real data or use cases, but we have a distribution which has an access service. There will be a web service who could probably provide different resolutions. So then we would lose maybe this information, which resolutions the access service can provide. But still, it would be on the specification level correct to say the minimum resolution is X.
Yeah.
So I also say +1, but there could be reasons to change it back to N if we find a reason. In theory, there could be one.
Currently, I think the general feeling is that, yes, we should restrict to 1 for both. And then, yes, if there are cases that we find out later that there are use cases where it wouldn't be useful to have it relaxed, then we can relax that in the next version. Is it okay? Anybody in disagreement with that? Not, then can we do right away the spatial resolution as well?
Yeah, so I just want to make one note on the last comment on the perspective from this service to data sets, is that the data set itself is not the technical description of all possibilities that a service can do. It's a description of the data itself, not a description of the technical potential of the service on the data.
So you might have to look to follow your nose to find out what the service can do.
The service has a service description, an endpoint description, and it might say, I can provide you data in temporal granularities, this, or this, and this, something like that, if you use this parameter. But the data that I provide has a minimal temporal resolution of that. So that's the connection from a data perspective. Otherwise, we are mixing the service technical description into the data sets. And I don't think that is the wise thing to do.
Okay, move on.
Yeah, okay. That's just a note on that. Spatial resolution, exactly the same request. It was actually in the same topic of the same issue. Same question. So would that be the same reasoning and the same application for it? Okay. That seems to be support for it. Yep.
Okay.
Then here we have a topic 141, which is and there will be I will come back to this topic after the next slide as well, and then we can concretely vote on it. In the sense that identifier has been requested to add a DCT identifier to agent. And this was motivated to ease the maintenance of the catalog with regard to agents. And if we discuss on that, then we can look to say, okay, what are which entities we should enforce identifiers on top of it? And should we put common guidelines on the usage of identifiers? So this is a topic that I want to elaborate with you on that. And then you can see if this is really necessary that we enforce or motivate to agents an additional property DCT identifier if that is valuable. So there is as well similar in this identifier space topic 187 that where we have the definition says that this property DCT identifier is the main identifier of a data set, and that the sentence therefore indicates that this has a restriction of a max cardinality 1. And the question is, of course, is this the only identifier in the sense that are people using multiple DCT identifiers into it or not? So that's unclear to us if people are currently today sharing more identifiers on DCT identifier. Note we have as well other identifier. So for this potential to add more identifiers. And to show a bit on the identifiers topic on the discussion there is that we have, if you look to identifiers, then we have two identifiers which play a key role. Very often we have the RDF, and I call it technical identifier, and we have DCT identifier, which has a value. And then the RDF identifier is disambiguated, is universally unique, is possibly persistent because this URI has these kind of properties, whereas this business identifier, the orange one, is assigned by the publisher. And the identifier properties that depends on the naming scheme that the business identifier is constructed in. And some businesses might just have provided a local name, a very weak one, and this can go to a technical one, UUID, where you don't know from which space it is, a URN, which is a namespace one but not resolvable, and if we say URI, URL, then they are potentially resolvable. In the linked data community, we use for both actually the same one. So they typically coincide and there is no need to have this different orange one than the one in the RDF. So this is the typical usage case that we have in new data, but it's not everywhere the case. And that's what then happens if you look to the practice, is that you, for the same data set, different portals might create portal identifiers. However, the business identifier, which in this case is UID, is always the same. So if you want to do that, then you have, you can identify or can find that this is about the same data sets. And yeah, coming back to our original request, or the two requests, adding identifiers to every entity, or in this case, specific entity agent, and the main identifier, the second request, that should be max cardinality 1. We are looking towards what is kind of the use cases for the identifiers and how we should act then upon that in DCAT-AP. One of the use cases we identified is, of course, detection of duplicates and how we're going to do that. The other one is traceability, so that you can trace throughout the harvesting process what is the original records, and maybe as well how we handle throughout the harvesting process the identifiers, so that this traceability or that the reference to the other systems can be addressed. So, question is, should we act on the two issues and say we put one of the two, give a change to it, or we consider the whole topic on an identifier in a broader context and see that in a guideline for next release? That is.
I have a strong opinion.
Yeah.
I have done a lot of harvesting implementations, and sometimes you need to bridge to other formats, like for instance CSW Inspire, and then they don't have URIs for things. And in the conversion step, you have to generate these, and sometimes this is done wrong, and you end up with blank nodes, and this is problematic. Because from merging perspective later on, because you don't want to know whether something is the same or not. Introducing a DC terms identifiers here is the wrong path, I would say, because it just makes this practice more apparent, and it's better to say, if you have an identifier and you need to transform this to RDF, we should recommend how to do a transformation to a correct URI for the agent and for the dataset and for the distribution. There should be the guide to always use URIs everywhere, and to make sure that you have unique ways of generating these URIs. There is a way of using, for instance, URN::UID. If you really have UIDs and you want to have them as correct URIs, you can. There is a simple transformation you can use. So that's my position.
If I may, speak for the point of view of Data Europa, where we do, harvesting from national catalogs, which on their term often harvest from more regional catalogs or local catalogs, it does make sense to keep the DCT identifier as possibly a multiple field. So if you restrict it to one, that would not work. And also, I would also maybe announce that now we're going to deal all URIs as the main identifier, so not the DCT identifier by RDF about value as a persistent URI now. So it's going to be coming shortly. So it would make sense to be able to express the original identifier as a different field. It could be probably done as the same as, but I don't think it is once it's harvested. So I would strongly insist on keeping the 0 to n cardinality for the DCT identifier of a data set.
Could you clarify what you mean that you are introducing stable URIs? Are you replacing the existing URIs of the data set with your own?
Well, yes, now they were expressed as a European data portal, and since we merged, it's now going to be it start with a dataeuropa.eu/882 and then the rest. Of course, the old URIs will still be redirected and maintained, but the main one is defined and managed as a persistent URI will be the Data Europa one, which you should already be able to see.
But if you're harvesting a data set from a country and that data set has a URI, will that data set's URI
So that should be
preserved?
that could be maintained as the DCT identifier if it's surely it's done if it's defined as such already.
I would argue that is wrong. You should never change the subject of the triples that you're harvesting.
Well, but once it becomes part of the Data Europa catalog, it is a difference. The URI is different. The only way
the
to
data
resolve
set
that
is
would
the
be
same.
I think so. May I just intervene? I think this is the topic. What I just want to highlight in the sense that this might be a big discussion, and that we should take substantial time for it to see the changes. And like Matthias mentioned, we should be careful what we do and how we do. And if people do different things all the time, then we might not end up in the objective that's what is meant with the identifier. So
for me, the DCT identifier is the, let's say, internal identifier. So.
And that's the thing where the discussion then comes on what is internal, what is external, and so on. And I think this is kind of a topic that we should take with care. And so my proposal is that we then dedicate a specific session on it or proposal and to see the thing.
It's good what you said, Bert, here on this slide. We need to see what the use cases are. Then from the use cases, we can say what the expectations are, what you would want to do with those, and what that would mean for the requirement of identifiers. And we already hear that there are different views here that we're not going to be able to agree on. And I think it's a good idea to have this as a separate case where we need to look into and maybe have a separate meeting on it where we can actually bring to the table the various use cases and what would be expected of identifiers.
Yeah, and that we can assign then the right semantics to what what DCT identifier means and what the RDF identifier means. Is there a difference or not? The expectations and so on, so that we that the expectations are the same. Because that's one feeling of the hearing that I have as well, that people interpret the value or the property differently.
Okay, so and the set is also in agreement that we should try and set up a separate discussion.
Sure, it's too complex and too important to just try to settle on this matter. So Hagar, thanks a lot for your input, and we'll set up a separate event.
Okay.
We can discuss together on on how and when to organize this. Well, I think we should perhaps then try to move on with.
So the proposal for the topics that I raised on the identifier, I will put them for future work. That's what we will do, and I invite you all that in addition to these use cases, if you have additional use cases and specific cases of identifiers, to communicate them to us, share them with us, and we can take that into account. Okay.
Well.
Okay, then another DCT type request, but then on the cardinality of data sets DC type. Currently, that is restricted to one, and the motivation was that actually there are two restrictions on it. One is that the ability to categorize with multiple code lists so that you can have types coming from different code lists, or with from one code list have assigned multiple types to multiple values, so multiple types to that data set. So this is the proposal of the request to lift the restriction. That's this, and we think, given the motivation, that this is a valuable request, and so our proposal is to lift the restriction, to make it n, multiple values. So we make more freedom on it. That's all what we do. That's the effects that we get. +1 to lift of YIM. Okay. Then connected with that, there is still there's a proposal of a code list, and there's we have the dataset type from the publications office, and we still want to make this as a kind of a recommended code list, so that we, at least if we use this DCT type for a dataset, we have a value, and that we can align on this. And the current list is here. Proposal is to be recommended. If you want to say it's mandatory, then it still can be in theory that we have multiple, and that you can use at your local profile another code list, but that will be then in addition to this one. That's the typical interpretation we have for that.
Okay. Any comments?
I saw it's something from Jesper.
Yeah, we're currently using DCT type. We have only one fixed type value, that's collection, and we use it to represent time series. And it would be a problem if we restrict this DCT type to a list when our one entry is not in that list, because we would break these data sets. We plan to model time series different when DCT3 comes out, DCAT-3 comes out, but currently we still use DCT type to model these time series.
So your proposal is to have it as a recommended code list,
not as mandatory.
Yeah, currently yes, because we still have this one value collection for our time series.
So the proposal is to have recommended. That was Jim is supporting it.
Okay. Is there also anyone against this? Then it's not moving on.
Okay, good. Then we continue for this. We recommend that.
Okay.
Okay, then on catalog level, the request was for DCT part of to lift the max cardinality, or it was maybe as well more a question, but the request then came down to lift the max cardinality of 1 to is part of for a catalog. The motivation seems that, yeah, that's what's more intuitive. You can be part of multiple catalogs, but there was no concrete use case provided in the sense that that the person who raised it said, well, look, this is kind of more informative. I want to see if it's possible. The limitation of this, what happens is that we actually organize catalogs in a tree shape. That's what you get, that you can organize that. And that is, so far we see fine. So people have not complained earlier on that. And since there was no concrete use case that it was needed, we just propose not to change.
And I think that comments on GitHub all had the opinion that there is no actual need to change this.
Yeah. Oh.
Over the +1s. I haven't seen any objections in GitHub either. So if there are any objections that people might want to speak up now. And if not, we'll just
continue for the
proposal.
Yeah. Okay.
No change.
No change for this one. Here, the following topic is on the algorithm for the checksum. Currently, we have in the specification that there can only be used one algorithm, SHA1, and the question was why we can't use others, because I have data sets distributions that I share under another checksum, and yeah, now I'm forced by DCAT-AP to use and to provide the SHA1. The request is to lift this unique value, but then at the requirement, you have to use a URI and known one by this list. So it's not a free list. We say the algorithm should be known, and that's what we want to enforce. So instead of enforcing universal uniqueness that the implementers only have to implement SHA1, now it is you have to implement one of them, or maybe many of them, but at least you can know which one you have to use.
I see +1s coming in for this.
Okay,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll also
do this change. That DCT creator max cardinality, there is again a request for lift with the max cardinality of 1 for DCT creator. There are one of the motivations is that then DCAT-AP can be used in a much broader context where creators play a much more important role as role of the entity. For instance, the open science cloud, where creators play a little bit more important role. So that is, if we do that, then the change will be that we have to update the definition or /usage node and remove primarily, and then we can lift the max cardinality. And just as a side note, if we do so, then there is actually no difference anymore with DCAT, and this might be then one of the properties that becomes kind of optional and listed.
Okay.
So is there any objection of lifting the max cardinality?
So no objections.
Okay, so we can execute this proposal too. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Temporal range. Here we had a request that if we look to the temporal properties, then currently in DCAT-AP, the temporal properties are restricted to XSD date time or XSD date. So a union of two temporal serializations. Now in DCAT, there is this XSD range has been extended to any temporal XSD serialization. So month and years, it says only as well, month, year, and years as well. So this is the request. Shall we follow this and allow all temporal XSD expressions similar as DCAT does?
Anyone objecting to that? So now I see 1 + 1 for temporal ranges.
So
it means also that we're again aligning with DCAT to W3C.
Okay, there seems to be support for that. Okay. Then what we have as well were some requests about more guidelines and best practices, and this is one of them on geographical coverage to stimulate a better harmonized usage. And there were mostly requests to kind of examples, etc. And then W3C already did some work and added extra usage nodes and examples in the DCAT specification. So I think this is sufficient unless people would like to have more guidelines and specific guidelines in the context of DCAT-AP. So question is this sufficient for you? Or do you think that we should work towards specific DCAT-AP guidelines?
For now, okay, that issue was by me. I think for now it's okay to use the W3C examples if they fulfill our Shackle rules. So it doesn't help us if the examples they have given are not valid for our Shackle rules.
Okay, that's a topic that we will do.
That's another topic, yeah.
In the sense that the shackle shapes should be tested and having that. That's a note that we make. Yeah.
So we'll do that. Any other comments? Okay, so we'll leave that as it is at the moment with the link to the examples of W3C, and then we plan to check the examples against our Shackle rules. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. A similar request then for temporal resolution and spatial resolution in meters. Here I would propose to look to the guidelines in GeoDCAT-AP, some of them in DCAT itself, but they are on how to use those. They are well explained, or examples illustrated over there. In addition, we could have the same check. So for the Shackle to do that, that's something that we can do. But kind of explanation-wise, I think you find a lot over there.
Okay. I see no comments, so I think that with the check, I think people are happy with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and then we have a topic which I collected under lifecycle management. And there are a few discussion points on these issues, and then just want to point to some of the issues that we have related to that. Is that the lifecycle management is about in which state the data set of data service is or distribution is. And that if we look to what our properties that we have today, is that we have a life cycle at the level of the catalog, in the sense that the catalog record has a change type, and that points to the latest revision of the dataset's entry in the catalog. So the metadata description life cycle. And then we have, at the level of distribution, we have at the moment two life cycle elements, status and availability, which are, one refers to the maturity of the distribution with this code list completed, deprecated, under development, and withdrawn, and availability, which is pointing to code list temporary, experimental, available, and stable. Now, if we look to W3C, then DCAT2 has added an extra property and inherited ADMS status in a more general statement. And so the meaning or the definition of ADMS status is the status of the resource in the context of a particular workflow process. So that is what is the property that is over there in DCAT. And DCAT-AP has these properties, ADMS status already being used, and to be a bit of aligning ourselves with DCAT and to make that clear, the following proposal is that we would update the definition of change type and distribution status in a sentence that is similar as the one on DCAT, but with more specific to the workflow that is actually targeted. And then the change would be for change type larger, in the sense that will be the status of the catalog record in the context of the editorial flow of the data set and the data service descriptions. So you know then that this has to do with this editorial flow on changing the descriptions. Whereas for distribution status, it's more similar as what we already have, the status of the distribution in the context of the maturity life cycle. So do you agree that we somehow align in this ADMS status definition usage of this property in style more as W3C, so that if you go from W3C DCAT to DCAT-AP, you see a more similar definition and that you can follow it?
The proposal to align with DCAT again. And I think there's also an agreement to have clarified descriptions in the specification for that alignment.
Okay, good. Yeah. Then a bit of a consequence, and this is in these issues raised. There's one of the requests in there where not the URI availability is dereferenceable. Now this is today with dereferenceable, made with dereferenceable. So you can do your curl or request a link data request, and if you want to ask turtle, you get a turtle representation of the property that's scoped to that property. And as well, if you have want to do the browser, then you get the RDF document that we have in our specification, next to our specification, that you will get, as we don't have yet an HTML representation. So if we have an HTML representation of the specification, then we will redirect the HTML to the point where this is in there. Okay, yes, R5, yes, my typo, R5R, yes, should be an overlook.
Okay.
So this is an announcement that this is now available and this is addressed. So it's one of the side questions in it.
I'm sorry, wasn't it discussed that the availability vocabulary will go to a publications
the code
office?
list, that's the next slide. That's the next slide. That's the next slide.
Sorry.
That's this one. So we have as well a controlled vocabulary, the values of DCAT-AP availability of the property, so that we have the ability as property as a code list, and that code list will be maintained by the publications office. On that, in order to release it by the 8th of December, so the publications office has a release cycle, and we would like to join the release cycle of the publications office of the 8th of December. We should have finalized by the 1st of November the code list. And we would like to have on the community the following confirmation, namely on the title. That's the next slide. I have a short vote on that in order to finalize it. So we have the proposal is namely that the URIs will be of the form publications office. Okay, the title should be now that's the subject of it. Publications office Europe.eu resource authority, and then title. That's a discussion for the next slide. Concepts, and the concept might be temporary, stable, and if I'm right. Yeah, the two others doesn't. You have to scroll back. And then we have to change the URI of the concept scheme as well to the new one. Currently in the proposal was distribution availability, but we would like to change distribution availability to new title. And the old URIs will be deprecated. We will do a CL, so I will forward them to this. So that's what will happen.
A redirect.
A redirect, yes. And this is our question, and that we would like to resolve, and preferably today in the working group. We have 3 proposals instead of distribution availability. And we would like to have your votes put in the chat, 1, 2, or 3, and then we just calculate for it.
We have 1 vote, 2 votes, 3 votes for number 2.
And if you don't want to vote, you can put a minus or something, or 0, since it's indefinite.
4 votes for 2, 5 votes for 2. I think see something appearing here. All 2s so far. Nothing else. I also saw on GitHub a vote for number 2, but I think it's the same of one of the voters here.
Yes.
Anyone is against the title planned availability, then please speak up. Otherwise, Matthias is fine with number 2. People are really against it, then I would hope they can speak up now or forever remain silent.
Yeah, it's this kind of vote.
Okay, so we'll go ahead with number 2.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. And then we can put this in this publication cycle of the publications office, and then the URIs, and we will adapt and do the necessary technical changes. Okay, just as a consequence of it, so it means that if we have, as community, if you say, I would like to have a new value for it, then there are 2 ways to have it. Either you directly contact the publications office on that code list, and then they might come back to us as community, say there's a proposal to extend to it, so that we are aware of it, that the community doesn't get new concepts into it that doesn't know how to handle it, so that we are aware of it. Or you go to our GitHub of DCAT-AP, and then we communicate and we sync with the publications office.
I would suggest that that second one, going through our GitHub, is the better way of doing it. Then it's more direct into the group that actually have the knowledge about it.
Yeah, okay. But we make the agreement that normally we will get from the publications office.
Yeah.
If there's something on the side comes to them, that we are getting notified. But
okay, good. Please move on.
Clarification of differences between stable and available.
If that's a new issue, then we can put that on GitHub.
Yeah, okay. We will try to improve the to make the definitions of the individual statuses as clear as possible.
Okay.
That's what we aim for. Okay. Okay. Then a topic on Shackle. As Pavlina already mentioned, we had in the past a long discussion on Shackle. There are some improvements made already to the Shackle validator of DCAT-AP. There are a number of options made on how you can validate and combine the rules. so that you can browse through, essentially, if you have a specification that you can say, okay, what is actually wrong or why I have to put attention to. And one of the elements in the long discussion we had was that ranges often are inferred or assumed to be holding, and this is kind of separated. Now you can choose to validate with ranges or without ranges. Of course, there might be combinations that for your particular case that you would like to validate something more out of this, then you have to do your own combination of the individual Shackle specifications, but at least we have somehow combined things that gives a kind of an expected outcome. So you should be able to get to estimate what is the outcome of errors that you will get with this set of rules. That's the goal. We had references to requests to alter the DCAT-AP shackle shapes of 1.2.1 and to update them. Now, our proposal is just to deprecate that because we are going forward. So we would propose not to do further updates on the older ones, but keep and maintaining and improving the new ones. So that is our proposal, and not just close the issue.
And I see +1s, 1, 2, 3, 4 coming in on the proposal.
Lutjer, you?
So I think it was a +1.
It's a plus. Okay.
Lutjer, if it's not a +1,
yes, it was a plus.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, good. So that's that one. Then there was a question and on how to handle with controlled vocabularies if we do a validation of that. And then this is more kind of an explanation how it currently works. And that is we can see if this is kind of the best fit for purpose or not. But that's yeah, just to set the settings, the scenes, and that people can have an expected result of it.
Jesper asked whether the validator works.
Work.
Get 0 errors. Can't believe his data is fully valid.
That depends on the option. You have to look to the options then.
I've chosen the base 0, the 0.1 base 0 shackle shades. But if I try to download the shapes, I get an almost empty file.
Oh, and okay. I have to, maybe let's see that offline. So if you can point. You can even create an GitHub issue with your example or something like this, and I can have a look to it. That's no problem to do that.
Okay.
Okay, so on this validation of core vocabularies, you know that we have different levels of usages of advised usages of controlled vocabularies. We have ones which are really mandatory, some are recommended. Some are a little bit more advised or conditionally to be used in some cases. So there's kind of a mixture of things that happen in there. So you have to be aware that this is there, and this might be that this has an impact on the expectations that you are wanting to get out, depending on how you see this more or not. Then you have to know that validating whether or not a particular node, a particular value is a member of a controlled vocabulary that is dependent sometimes, or actually dependent on how the controlled vocabulary is implemented and what is information that is available, etc. So there are different options, and this can be dependent on the controlled vocabulary and the way how this is being published and so on. And then and the third bullet point I want to raise is that in DCAT-AP, historically, there is as well an idea or motivation into it that if we use code lists and controlled vocabularies, that they should be well published and well maintained, and that therefore is some minimal information available about the code list. It's just not something that you pick and it's just a simple tabular list, but it is something that is well published and well maintained, and that it is has consequences of let's say minimal information that is available. And then in the end, and this is a topic already mentioned in the SHACL webinars as well, that we try to represent as close as possible what is specified in the specification with the SHACL constraints, and that we don't want to deviate too much from that with an alternative interpretation. In that topic of bullet 3, there's a topic that is that a code list or category which is mapped to SCOS concept scheme and COS concept, that this is well published. And in particular to the category, there are some minimum properties kind of expressed, like a title. And not every controlled vocabulary has this already available. So if you would download and have this code list, then you might get an error because the title of the code list is not available. So Publications Office has looked to it and said, well, we are going to put that guideline as well in practice and combine and add this additional extra information of the concept schemes slowly, progressively throughout the code lists, so that this will become validatable as well and satisfiable as well. So it's often there is a pref label for this concept scheme available, and then the value will be the same for the DC title. That kind of activity that is ongoing and that might be growing over time. So the Publications Office informed us in the GitHub issue that they will follow this as well, these minimal requirements, and can adopt to that. Then there was a request on the GitHub of the SHACL validator for how does this work, and I get sometimes different errors. So to remind what is currently implemented, so if we do a range check, if for a property that has as range SCOS concept, then you will find in the ranges option of the SHACL shapes in that file, namely the check that the value should be a member of SCOS concept, should be a SCOS concept with severity error. That is what's currently implemented. So if you do that, then you have this test. And if we look in the controlled vocabularies file, SHACL shape template, then we check there whether or not a value is a member of a known controlled vocabulary. And what we do there is we import the code lists. And then we check if the value, the actual supplied value in the data, is then has a statement in SCOS in scheme to that controlled vocabulary that we expect. That
Ludger said that the SPDX vocabulary doesn't fulfill these rules.
Yeah, that's depends. So we have to see how we, for every element, but for this is for the base principle that is implemented. So far, some we cannot download the controlled vocabulary, therefore there's no validation. So that's for some of them there's not a validation available.
And in the case of SPDX, it's also, it doesn't have a SCOS in scheme statement, so you can't actually verify that it's part of that.
It might be that we have to do for this one, if we have a result, an RDF file where we can rely on and we can download, etc. We have to implement slightly different.
Yeah, but that's something.
But it's kind of the principle that we try to use to say, okay, if we say SCOS is kind of the norm, SCOS concept scheme, then this is kind of the base principle. And the outcome might be then maybe surprising, in the sense that if you have a data set with only this triple into it, example, data set 1, DCAT team, data team EDUC, one of the publications office, then you just get an error if you use the validation rate of ranges. Why? Because there's nowhere stated that this is a concept. So you don't have an additional triple that says data team EDUC is a concept. That's not available in the data. And therefore you get this as an error. If you do the controlled vocabulary tests, then you will see that this is actually get a success, because we download the behind the scenes, the controlled vocabulary. Actually, we download then for every concept there is an in scheme element, and that's what, and then we have a success for that. So there's this is what the outcome is. So you get both outcomes depending on the file or on the check we do.
I think that's clear.
Information, how it works, and how the checks are sit together, because the background information is not loaded in ranges.
Okay.
So that's just to be aware that this is kind of the case.
That's it, I think.
That's it. That's indeed. That's what I wanted to share with the Shackle ships. Most of the things of the Shackle, if you look to it, will be therefore resolved or explained, and then I think, yeah, the most thing is then to use them to see if you have comments, and if it doesn't work, then we have to see. That's a topic, yes. If you consider cost concept not to be useful to be checking, and we could split ranges in ranges of anything and ranges of cost concepts, but that is yeah, I don't know if there should be a difference between the two.
Yeah, I understand, but it's like checking if the document you find under behind the FOV page,
yeah,
if it is tagged as FOV document.
Exactly, it's exactly the same. So that's the reason why we put ranges in a separate file and say, well, we usually assume that this is fulfilled, and unless you want to do this check, then yeah, you can do it. You can include it. You have the rules, and your harvesting or whatever validation process can include them if they consider this to be valuable.
But there are ranges that are useful to check. So I think it's a good first step. Maybe we can discuss it when we are talking about the 3.0.
Yeah, okay.
For the Shackle rules, we would have a proposal. Would it be possible to exclude the Shackle rules from the release cycle and develop them in parallel, or after we finish the next version of the specification? Because I think it's the timing, the time we have to check the specification is already very short. That is another thing we would like to discuss, and I think it would make more sense to get on the same level for the specification, finish it, and then get the correct Shackle shapes for the new specification. Because otherwise, we always have to check both, and which is right, which is wrong.
That's I think,
yes.
Yeah, I think this is really possible. Yeah, Paulina. Yeah.
Yes, I do agree. If you think that this makes more effective to split those two things and look at the second level, the shackle shape, and re-examine it, I guess we can do this. It's no problem on our side. We also make it clear, I think last year when we have a dedicated webinar on Shackle Shaper to check things together, things separately. It is an option, yes, of course, we do not want to force our working group to do things, to accept the things that into very short notice time frame. So yes, we can do this.
And I see a note from Jakub, a proposal to think about what we would expect of the validation level of data. And I think this is a big issue, and I would also suggest to keep that for future work to see how we can actually express the preferences or the expectations for the level of SHACL compliance. Let's put that on the list to discuss a little later. Is that okay? Okay. I think we're done with your presentation.
Yeah.
Bert,
yeah. We are now on the last slides to conclude the webinar. So as of today, so with this webinar, we would like to kick off the public review. What will happen is that some of the topics are not yet addressed in the specification. So we discussed now some of the elements, so they will be gradually introduced in the draft. There were some remarks sent to us that the specification, the draft specification was yet not to be found, easy to find. So I created on the master branch a placeholder so that you can refer to the current draft of it. So that was what I will do as well is gradually, when it is really addressed, put a flag on the GitHub issue that it's in the specification, so that you're clear that this is in the text and fully aligned. And that I clean up as well the GitHub in a way that gradually you see that it's being resolved. Normally, all the topics, and that's what we will do as first next, is all the proposals and the comments that we have gathered today, put that as a resolution in the GitHub, and that will be executed. So if you have another comment yet on the resolution, that is then to be discussed in that individual topic.
Okay.
And we plan to end by the 15th of November to have everything ready, to have the topics. If any new topics or things, comments are addressed before that, we certainly have an answer and say yes or no, we can take it in or out. Things that come after it, we will probably move to a next upcoming release work in the future. To have a release in December.
Okay.
That is the plan. Just as a status at this moment, we have issues that 36 that are already somehow closed. So one fixed or moved to W3C. In the sense of that, we will not do anything on that. Invited still, if you have interested in a topic that is on W3C, discuss on it and contribute there. That is only to the benefit as well for DCAT-AP. And then we have 29 and 31 where there's community feedback provided. Most of them will now turn to a resolution provided. So this is the resolution that we will have. And then we have the discussions on that. And if I look correctly, then we have around 10 left issues already for the future. And that will be roughly plus a few that we will not resolve or postpone, like on the identifiers to the future. So that is what the current state of affairs is.
It's a question for Paulina.
Yeah.
So the question too is if the deadline can be moved to the end of December.
I think that it can be removed to the end of December if it gives the community.
So it could be a Christmas present.
Yes. New
Okay.
Year's.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yes.
Then there are some
Maybe we
announcements.
can then even get like 2 rounds. So we have now, I don't know, 2 weeks longer for giving feedback for the specification, and then you could give an update or answer to our remarks. Last time it was a little bit cryptic what will be the result in the final document, because we gave feedback in a very short time, and then we heard nothing, and then there was a release. This would be great. So, and I think we are not in a hurry for this release. It shouldn't 2 weeks shouldn't make the difference.
So would it on your side be then after the 15th of November, let's say that taking that date that we see now on the screen, we have kind of a summary status, what has been changed, that's what adapted. Would that help? Oh.
Yeah, and then like another week for further comment, and then finishing it, and you can release it in, I don't know, 1st of
So to create
January,
a change
15th
log
of January.
outcome saying this has been adapted, changed, etc., that you can have a walkthrough on it, and based on that, we do another short iteration towards the release.
Yeah, and changelog is a good keyword. I was asked to ask you if you could provide a changelog for the new version, because it would be way easier to compare versions.
Okay, I'll work on a changelog as well. That will be based on the GitHub one.
Okay.
Yes, that's a useful suggestion. Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Okay.
There are some announcements. We're running over 5
Yeah, I
minutes.
think we need to try to wrap up. But very happy to mention that Max will be presenting together with Sigrid from Estonia a short overview of the latest developments of DCAT-AP, and all of the work that we're doing here as a group will be reflected there. And actually, to come back to the comment of Lutger, in a way we are a little bit in a hurry, not too much, but still, because it's really important. I would say for all of the other work which is ongoing at the commission to try to wrap up and to have the revision ready by the end of the year. But it was a very good idea to come back to the change log because it's really essential for everyone to understand what is in actually or what are the changes which happen. Okay, thank you all. I don't know, Pavlina, if you have a...
Yes, I would like first of all to stay on Philip comment because it is also very important for us to know, since we are also investigating on the future of DCAT-AP, to see, to have the clear view, feedback on the future of DCAT US metadata scheme. So thank you for sharing this information. It's very important. I would like also to highlight the 2 issues that we take under consideration: the additional, the extra meeting that you would like to have about the identifier, as well as the special attention to the shackle shape, and also to invite you to the webinar of the 9th of November on core vocabularies. I interrupted Max that I wanted to say something.
No, I just also wanted to point the message from Philip and to ask people to contribute to the review of the United States DCAT implementation. Yes.
Okay.
That's it.
We would like to thank you very much for your participation and contribution to all of this new release. What do you mean, Lager, for the new release plan for future?
We had like a timetable for the last 2 years with bug fix, minor, major releases, and plans when the contributions should stop and so on. Is there something for the future plans so we could maybe align our DCAT-AP DE releases with upcoming releases?
I think that's a good idea, and I think we're going to do that in the next month or so that there is an overview of what we think we're going to do and when we're going to do that in the next 2 years.
Indeed, we're still have a changing policy of how to create different releases. We try to stick on those this policy, changes release policy. So, however, since there are all also ongoing things such as the one mentioned by the DCAT-AP US study, as well as a similar study that we are things that we are also investigating. Yes, we take this under consideration as one of our future plans to provide more concrete future dates for future improvements.
And as Ludger says, there is work being done at W3C, which also will mean that we have some work in DCAT-AP to do in the next year. And then there will be DCAT-4 at W3C as well. So we're keeping busy. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much from my side as well. Thank you for your contributions.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
your work.
Bye.
Bye-bye.